When the 2024 presidential campaign field features the first former president to ever be impeached twice and criminally indicted 4 times, you would think having already served as vice president would make Mike Pence the top-tier contender for the Republican Party. But you'd be wrong. According to a recent Emerson College poll, Pence is splitting 4th place with Nikki Haley. And that's an improvement in his position. The vice presidency is a common stepping stone to the West Wing, with 8 vice presidents before Pence seeking the office since World War II. 6 of them won their party's nomination, but Pence is polling the lowest out of all of them comparatively. He's only the 3rd vice president to run against a president he's served under, and he's the first one to do so in more than 80 years. But more importantly, his choice to defy Trump and to certify the real results of the 2020 elections has turned the MAGA crowd against him, if they were ever really with him. Joining me now is Olivia Troy, former senior advisor to Mike Pence and former Homeland Security advisor. Olivia, good morning. It's always so good to have you on the show. According to that Emerson poll that we just showed the viewers on the screen, Pence did get a small bounce in the polls following the first debate, but he's still trailing far, far behind Trump. Is it a time for him and the other candidates to take a page out of the Chris Christie playbook and come out swinging against Donald Trump?
Good morning, Katie. Well, yes. I think part of the reason that Mike Pence got a bump after the debate was the fact that he came out swinging. That was the most sort of aggressive and personality that we've seen from Mike Pence in a while when it comes to being more forceful in terms of where he stands on things and being more forceful about the events of January 6th more publicly like that on stage. And so I think that was part of it. It's whether he can maintain that momentum and continue down that path that I think will make a difference for him. But like in your opening, you stated it perfectly. And I think it's a good reminder that here's the issue. The majority of Republican voters right now believe that the 2020 election was stolen, which is disheartening. And so how is a candidate who was front and center and certifying that election, and rightly so, doing the right thing that day, how is he expecting to gain that support back? And I think that is a conundrum of Mike Pence that he'll continue to face.
Yeah, but Olivia, Mike Pence is no hero, though. He did what he was supposed to do on January 6th, but he was also one of the candidates that raised their hand when asked during that debate if they would support Donald Trump if he was nominated, even if he's convicted. And so why should Americans think that Mike Pence would actually be able to lead America and defend it and defend democracy if he can't even say on a stage where Donald Trump isn't even there that he won't support Donald Trump if Donald Trump is convicted?
I think that's a great question, Katie. I think that I would ask that to every single person on that stage who raised their hand, because quite frankly, I thought that was the most deplorable moment of the evening. The fact that all of these people were able to stand there and say if convicted, they would still support this dangerous individual. And I think, that tells you, unfortunately, where the Republican Party stands right now. This is a crisis of their own making. All of these individuals could have actually made a difference, a very big difference, I believe, in the past couple of years by actually taking a stand publicly and saying what Donald Trump is saying is just not true. But they have sort of waffled on it. At times, they've kind of stuck their neck out. At other times, they've gone along with it, right? And so now here they are. Now you have an entire group of people who are trying to run for the presidency and trying to balance this. But then they're also showing their true colors because they still can't stand up to this man, even though it's the right thing to do. So look, I give tremendous credit to Asa Hutchinson. He didn't waver. His head didn't go half up. He stood there on his own and did not raise his hand. But unfortunately, a traditional conservative like Asa right now isn't polling well and likely doesn't stand a chance. And the Republican Party would be better off going with someone like Asa Hutchinson. But that's not where they are today. That's not who they are.
So I do want to ask you about Asa Hutchinson, but I did want to pivot for just a second and talk to you about something that you've personally experienced, standing up and talking about what's real and what's true. We know Trump and his MAGA followers, they lean into threats. They lean into intimidation, which can make going against the grain like you've experienced very isolating and very scary. A few days ago, you tweeted, in part, to anyone else who needs to hear this, they may make you feel like you're completely alone and have no one else, but it's how they operate. We're all out here to assist if you need it. The truth is a powerful thing. I mean, Olivia, you wrote that in response to the fact that Yuscil Taveras, who is one of the Trump employees, has actually flipped and is cooperating with the federal government now in the Mar-a-Lago case, one of the several criminal cases that Donald Trump is facing. Is there a support system for people like yourself and somebody like Mr. Taveras who have distanced themselves from the Trump-affiliated GOP, even though they're undergoing, even now, relentless attacks of fear and threats and intimidation?
I would say yes. Look, we're private about it. We're behind the scenes, but I can tell you that there's a community of people who have lived this firsthand, who know how hard this is. A lot of us have given up our entire careers to take a stand. And I would say that, we're here to support each other and get each other through it. And that is partially why I am constantly reminding people that, it's not too late to do the right thing. They may make you feel like you have no other option. They may make you feel like they're the only ones that are going to help you out when you're boxed in, and they're going to pay your legal bills and they're going to do your representation for you as long as you cooperate, in quotes, and do what they consider to be the right thing. But I think it's important to remember, there are people like Cassidy Hutchinson who have taken a stand, and others. And so I think, it's hard. Look, I'm not going to lie to you, Katie, you know this. It's hard when you get the threats and you worry about your name out there and people showing up your house and what it does to your family. But the reality is that I can sleep better at night knowing that I'm doing everything I can to do the right thing for our country, and I'm doing everything I can to support others who end up in situations like this where they feel very alone and where they feel intimidated and bullied. And look, I implore you and others that when they stick their necks out, we have to have their backs, because if people don't start taking a stand and if they don't come forward and they're too scared to cooperate, that is how we continue down this path. And I think, look, collectively, we're stronger than the one bully who operates like the mob boss who's trying to intimidate all of us.
Olivia Troye, thanks for being with us. As always, you always speak truth to power, and I appreciate you being here.